Drafting your story doesn't always go the way you expect it to. Your characters veer off their outlined path, new plot points come to light as you're writing, or you even realize the direction your story is going doesn't align with your vision for the story anymore. So what now? Do you wrangle the characters back in line? Do you change the direction of the story? Do you just ignore it and carry on writing? Basically, what's the best way to handle these challenges when they come up in your draft? In today's episode, I'm going to talk to you about exactly that. So grab your favorite beverage and a cozy spot and let's get into it. Okay, so as you might know, if you've seen any of my recent episodes, I'm busy drafting an epic fantasy for my Writing Journey 2.0 project. And even though I'm basically still at the starting gate in terms of word count for the story, this week I had some setbacks, or let's call them challenges, that I had to work around so I could move forward with my story. Now, just a reminder, every writer's process is different, so it's quite difficult to give exact advice as to what might work for you specifically, but hopefully by sharing my experience with you, it might give you a new or different way to look at the challenges in your own draft. Alright, so let's get to a bit of story time. In my epic fantasy, I've written maybe the first 5 or 6 scenes, the beginning basically, but it didn't really feel right. It felt like there was something off, and from my own experience, I knew I wouldn't be able to move forward or to continue writing until I figured out what the problem was and how I should approach the problem. So basically, what happened was I have included all the elements that I mentioned in last week's episode, and I'll link that down below for all the elements that you need to have for your beginning. But I wrote the story or those scenes from my main character's point of view, but it was almost like he was standing on the sidelines and watching everything happen. There was plot progression, there was conflict, but there was no stakes for this character. Nothing was affecting him directly, and that was a problem. So once I had determined the problem, there's a few ways that I could have approached it, and I'm going to give you a few options here and tell you what I ended up doing and why I chose that option. So the first thing that I could have done was made notes on all the changes that I wanted to make to those scenes or the beginning, and then just continue writing as if those changes were already made. I could have also deleted the scenes and rewritten them from scratch. I could have also replotted the story so that the scene that I've written made sense as it was. Basically, in this case, it would have meant changing the POV character to one that had the most stakes or was affected most by what was going on. And another thing that I could have done was to keep all the scenes that I've written and just insert a new scene or a new couple of scenes with the beginning the way that I wanted it, and to rework the elements that I've discovered in those initial scenes that I've written into the story at a later time. So what did I do? I kept the scenes and I inserted a new scene with the beginning that I wanted. The reason why I chose this option was because, first of all, I knew that I couldn't just leave it and continue writing. And also because I've established some details and elements that I don't want to lose, but I needed this beginning to start at a different moment where my POV character has the most at stake and is affected the most by what's going on. And I also discovered I could start the story with an earlier scene from this main character's point of view and still use the scenes that I've written so far after this beginning. That way, I don't lose any words or any details, but the story is at a place where I am happy to continue writing. And that's ultimately the point when we think about changing or adapting the writing process while we're drafting. We want the writing process to serve us in a way so that we can continue writing. And if it doesn't serve you, then it would potentially keep you from continuing to write or finishing your story. So don't be afraid to adjust the process as you're drafting. If you need to replot, then replot. If you need to rewrite a scene before you can continue, then do that. And if you need to just ignore it and continue writing as if the changes have already been made, then that's what you should do. I'm sharing this with you because, especially for new writers, they tend to get the advice to just write. No matter how bad it is, no matter what things go wrong, you just put on blinders and get the words on the page. Because don't worry, you can fix it later. That's what the editing phase is for, right? And don't get me wrong, it's not bad advice for some people and some situations. Because sometimes we do need to just sit down to write. But what can happen in these situations is the writer have now postponed all the issues and the challenges that they faced during the draft to the editing phase, to their future selves. But then when they get to that editing phase, they are so overwhelmed by everything that they've put off or everything that they've postponed while drafting that they are unable to actually edit the book. And then where does that leave you? It leaves you with an unedited draft that you can't do anything with. So no matter what, do whatever you need to do to get back to the writing. And if you don't know what to do, try different things. That way you'll find the best way that works for you. Just remember, when I talk about editing as you go or rewriting scenes, I'm not talking about things like grammar or sentence structure or things like that. I'm talking about the big picture things like character, plot, and pacing. And it's not about rewriting scenes until you get perfection. It's about rewriting scenes until you get back to progress. Just do what's necessary to get yourself back to that positive momentum and to get back to the flow of the words on the page. And that's exactly what I did in my own draft. I just rewrote enough so that I can get back to where I was satisfied with the beginning in order to continue writing. It's not perfect. It's not polished, but by using strategies and advice that works for who I am, how I think, and where I am with my story, I could get back to what mattered, writing the story. And that's my hope for you, that you can learn to take the advice that serves you and leave the advice that doesn't. So hopefully this episode has helped you to understand that any advice can be both good or bad. It all depends on where you are, how you think, and what works best for you and your story. And if you've enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you'd consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment down below. So until next time, may your creativity flow freely and your fingers dance upon the keys. Keep writing with joy and stay connected. Cheers.